Hi, we're here at the Pascack Historical Society. I'm Dr. Marilyn Miller.
And I'm Kristen Buscher. And today we're going to show you an exhibit that opened in November of 2015 at the Pascack Historical Society and ran through February of 2016, all about the Campbell family of Park Ridge.
We were most fortunate to have 4 ledger books donated to the Historical Society by descendants of the Campbells. And on the opening of the exhibit, we were honored to have them with us. Linda Van Orden of Allendale, New Jersey, and Susan Accardi of Simsbury, Connecticut were here when we opened the exhibit. Kristen and I arranged the exhibit by looking at the ledger books and allowing them to speak to us and tell us the story of the Campbells.
The exhibit really should take the viewer on a journey that follows the ledger books themselves. The patriarch of the Campbell family was William Campbell, who emigrated from Ulster County in Northern Ireland. That would have been in the 18th century. And he originally lived in New Milford. His son, John W., later moved to the Pascack, what would become the Pascack Valley area. I believe that was Montvale. And in addition to being a blacksmith, which was his primary trade, also got involved in the wampum business, which was a cottage industry among local farmers at the time.
So the official borough logo of Park Ridge says, "By industry we flourish." And indeed, wampum making was probably the first real industry in town. And as we go through the exhibit, we'll explain to you how the Campbells not only made wampum, but were truly entrepreneurs and developed wampum making into an import and export business.
William had emigrated to New Jersey from Ireland. His son, John W., then is the first one to really move to what would become the Pascack Valley. Of course, at the time, it was all part of the township of Washington. He had a son, Abraham J. Campbell, and then Abraham J. had 4 sons, John A., James A., David A., and Abraham. And they're really the ones who we would associate with the wampum trade in the Pascack Valley, and they're the ones that really put the Pascack Valley and Park Ridge on the map in terms of the wampum trade. We're lucky enough to actually have photos in our archive that we have on display as part of the Campbell family exhibit. We have photos of John A. and his wife, along with their homestead, which stood at 92 Pascack Road in Park Ridge. It's no longer there. James A., who was really the business manager among the Campbell family. He never married. And then there was David A. Campbell. They also lived on Pascack Road near what would be Campbell Road in Woodcliff Lake, of course, named for the family. Their house has also since been demolished. That was torn down in the 1980s. And then there's Abraham, who actually married a Wartendike, which is another very famous name in Park Ridge in Woodcliff Lake. And they lived on the west side of Pascack Road to the south of their brother John. And their house later burned, and it is also demolished. None of the Campbell family homesteads are still standing. They're all either businesses now or newer homes. The Campbell Wampum Mill also is no longer existing. So basically what we have left of the Campbell family, we have some ephemera in the photographs that we have of them. We have their wampum machine, of course, which is the cornerstone of our exhibit at the Pascack Historical Society. And we have their ledger books, which is why these ledger books are so incredibly important to us. It's one of the only relics that we have of what at the time was one of the Pascack Valley's first entrepreneurial families.
So in the early days, most people were farmers, and we are lucky enough to have a dress that a farmer's wife would have worn during this time period. Because farming was a seasonal activity, there wasn't much to do from the month of October to March. And The Campbells worked as blacksmiths, but during that time period, they decided they could do something else, and that was manufacture wampum. Wampum was used in trade, and initially the wampum was made by hand from shells. Some of the hand tools that we have are a chisel and a breastplate and a drill. It was very difficult to make wampum by hand. Depending on what type of shells were utilized, the color of the wampum could vary from white to pink to purple, and its value was dependent on the color. Where do these shells come from? And here again we get insight into the entrepreneurial skills of the Campbells. They actually traveled to what is now Rockaway Beach in Long Island, where ships would come from the West Indies, and conch shells and other shells were actually used as ballast to balance the ships. The conch shells would be discarded when they arrived at their destination in Rockaway. The Campbells purchased those shells for next to nothing. And then they would travel to Park Ridge, which was actually called Pascack at the time, by wagon. The shells would travel from Rockaway by small sloops up the Hackensack River to Old Bridge, which is now New Milford, and there they would be placed in wagons to complete their journey to the Pascack area. The Campbells actually sold the shells to farmers who would be making the wampum by hand during the winter months. And primarily the women made the wampum. Later on, the men got involved. When the wampum was manufactured, the Campbells would repurchase the made wampum, transport it back to New York, and then sell it at a much higher price. So they really made a huge profit, serving both supply and demand and working both ends of the manufacture of the wampum. In this case, we actually have some of the wampum displayed. Here there are pink moons. Then you'll see a string of wampum, and actually the word wampum means a string of beads. You'll see some purple wampum here, and again, this all depended on the shells from which the raw materials were obtained. Over here, and we'll show you some more, are hairpipes. The moons and hairpipes were uniquely manufactured by the Campbells.
Now, to put this into some context, we have some photos on display of what these hairpipes actually looked like in action. Up here, you can see them worn in the hair as adornment. They were also worn as breastplates. Here's Chief Red Cloud of the Lakota Sioux, posed in a portrait around the 1880s. You can see the shell hairpipes. And while there were metal hairpipes before the Campbells came along, really the shell hairpipes are attributed uniquely to them. Over here, these are blanks of what would become hairpipes later on when they were rounded out. And these here are actually hairpipes of assorted sizes that came from the Campbell wampum factory, and these are from the 19th century. Now, as we said, drilling out shell hairpipes was an incredibly time-consuming and delicate procedure. It's very, very easy for a metal drill going through essentially a tube of shell to either snap off, to snap the shell, or a lot of wasted product, a lot of wasted time at a point when it was, very time-consuming. In response, the Campbell family, and particularly James A. Campbell, who's pictured back here, our bachelor, invented a wampum drilling machine. It's the cornerstone of our exhibit at the Pascack Historical Society. It's the only one invented in the world. He never patented it. There originally would have been two of them. This is the only one that's left. The wampum machine enabled the Campbells to produce up to 400 pieces of wampum a day. Now you have to think, doing it by hand, they were making about 40 pieces a day. So imagine how much profit would have skyrocketed by using the wampum machine. And, of course, less breakage, and the wampum was much more standardized. You really would make a standardized product. It would have been even more valuable. And, of course, this wampum machine was stored inside the Wampum Mill, their Campbell Wampum Mill, which was located along the Pascack Brook, all the way at the back of what's still called Wampum Road, next to Park Ridge High School. And a lot of people don't know why it's called Wampum Road. That's why it's called Wampum Road. That's where the Wampum Mill was. They kept it under lock and key. This wasn't a machine that they wanted people to see. This was sort of their secret weapon.
One of our other treasures is this buffalo robe. And there's a connection between the Campbell brothers and the Lewis and Clark expedition. Wampum was sold in New York City to Indian traders, including John Jacob Astor of the American Fur Company. We now have proof that the hairpipes were sold to a gentleman named Chouteau, who in turn sold them to Lewis and Clark. The wampum was used to purchase buffalo robes from the Indians. And so this is actually a buffalo robe that was traded in exchange for the hairpipes.
Here's one of the ledger books. It's open to a page pertaining to business transactions spanning 1827 to 1829. These are blacksmithing transactions. You can see what the Campbells were owed for services that they provided in terms of blacksmithing. We can only assume that the X's on them are perhaps marking who paid. One of the most interesting elements of the book is seeing the names of people who lived in town, especially repeat customers. On this page, we have last names like Perry, Ackerson, Demarest, DeBon, Jersey. We know where these people, a lot of the time, we know where these people lived. We know that they were local to Park Ridge, Woodcliff Lake, and it's fascinating to see a glimpse into their everyday life as written in the ledger books of the Campbells. It's also interesting to note much of the spelling in the books is done phonetically. A lot of the time, if you say debtor, it might say D-E-T-T-E-R, as it shows here. Sleigh shoes or S-L-A-Y shoes. Weighing, in terms of weighing metal for the blacksmithing, it would say W-A-Y-I-N-G, and we found that to be very interesting.
In this ledger book, we have reference to Chouteau, who was instrumental in taking the wampum out to the plains. So you can see Chouteau mentioned many times in here. And the other thing that is illustrated is the value of the different color of the wampum. So there's black wampum, there's white wampum, spelled W-I-T-E. And you can see that they're valued differently. On the other page, you'll see references to the robes, and they are the buffalo robes that we mentioned before. So there's a real connection between the Campbells of Pascack, now known as Park Ridge, and the plains and the Indians of the plains. Primary profession, they were blacksmiths. And here is some of the typical materials and implements made by blacksmiths during the time period. There are files, tongs, various hooks, and different implements used in the barn. One of the things that the Campbells also did was improve the rudders on a sled. And in fact, when we looked at the ledger book, there were many references to horseshoes and sleigh shoes. And interestingly enough, the word sleigh is spelled S-L-A-Y in these books. This ledger book tells us mostly about the Campbells as blacksmiths, and you'll see references to the manufacture of horseshoes, sleigh shoes, plow shoes, and what we did was let the ledger books tell us the story of the Campbells. So as we took you around the exhibit, we showed you the Campbells as blacksmiths, we showed you their connection to the buffalo robes, and we showed you their wampum manufacturing.
With this element of the exhibit, we really wanted it to be like a virtual room. We have a ledger opened to a blacksmithing page under acrylic, of course, protected. It's sitting on our 1790 desk, and we put some objects that maybe would have been on a desk from the time period, a glass inkwell from 1850, a pair of reading glasses. We wanted it almost to feel like visitors to the museum or a member of the Campbell family standing at their desk looking at one of the ledgers. And we hope that we accomplished that. These fabulous portraits that we have on the wall are the eldest Campbell brother, John A. Campbell, on top. Underneath is his wife, Hannah Demarest. They lived at 92 Pascack Road. They had 3 daughters. John Campbell was the son of Abraham Campbell, seen over here, looking like a very, very casual shot. He lived from 1815 to 1899, and we're fortunate enough to also have this picture of his granddaughter, Elvina Campbell, who lived from 1850 to 1915, and this fabulous painting of the Campbells' Wampum factory, actually painted by Elvina herself.
The exhibit officially closes February 15th, 2016. However, some of the artifacts will remain on display. Our wampum machine is a cornerstone exhibit at the Pascack Historical Society and can be seen during the hours that the museum is open. The museum is open on Wednesdays from 10 to 12 and on Sundays from 1 to 4. In addition to the wampum machine, some of the wampum, the shells, and the implements used to make it by hand, and the Campbell family exhibit will remain on display for the foreseeable future. We really encourage you to come to our museum. It's really a hidden gem within the Pascack Valley. There's much on display and much to learn, so we hope you visit us sometime soon.